We've all heard of King Henry VIII, the infamous monarch of England from Tudor times. Henry was born in 1491, the second surviving son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. He was brought up alongside his older brother, Arthur, and younger sister Mary, with the intention that Arthur would become king. Henry would go on to marry into a foreign royal house and produce legitimate heirs for the throne. However, when their father died in 1509, it was Henry who took the crown after Arthur had died of an unknown illness just before his wedding to the Spanish princess was due to take place. While the young king ascended to the throne amid great celebrations, including a magnificent procession through London, in which a giant dragon representing the House of Tudor was carried aloft on poles, there were some dark omens at this time. A comet streaked across the sky, which astrologers said foretold the death of a notable person. Then on the day of his coronation, a great fire broke out near the city. Although it didn't spread, many saw it as a bad sign. And when a French chronicler recorded that the people of London were saying, "God damn the new king," Henry knew he had his work cut out if he was going to make his reign a success. In some ways, Henry was extremely lucky. While he wasn't particularly bright, he did have good advisors early on, including his counselors, the Bishop of Winchester and the Earl of Surrey. Plus, he was blessed with a powerful, if somewhat brutal, conclave of half-sisters, the heirs of King Edward IV. After a brief fling with a mysterious woman named Elizabeth Blount, Henry married Catherine of Aragon, the former Queen of Spain and widow of his brother Arthur. In 1509, she bore him a daughter, Mary, but soon suffered a series of Desperate for a male heir, Henry became infatuated with Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn, believed to be the most beautiful woman in England. Anne turned the king's head to such an extent that he decided he wanted a divorce. Not only did Catherine refuse to accept the announcement, she was backed up by her powerful uncle, the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, with the Pope unwilling to grant Henry's request. The king took matters into his own hands and broke with the Catholic Church, declaring himself supreme head of the Church of England in 1534. As a result, England became the first nation to break away from the Church and sparked the Protestant Reformation across Europe. Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1533, and Henry married her after divorcing Catherine. Although he kept the former queen as a rival claimant to the throne, Henry then began his quest for a legitimate son and heir, having 6 more wives over the course of his reign. These included Anne's former ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, who finally bore him a son, the future King Edward VI, but died shortly afterwards, and Catherine Howard, whose infidelity led to her execution. Along the way, he also managed to have children with 2 of his wives, ladies-in-waiting, including a son with Catherine Parr, who outlived him. While the constant upheaval and the breaking with Rome had a profound effect on England, there were other changes to the country and the world during Henry's reign. In 1536, following the Pilgrimage of Grace, a major rebellion by northern English nobles against his religious reforms, Henry established the Court of Star Chamber to deal with perceived threats to his authority. This court operated without juries, and its decisions could not be appealed, making it notorious for its harsh punishments. Henry also began the process of dissolving the monasteries, seizing their lands and wealth to fund his lavish lifestyle and expensive foreign wars. This was continued under his successors, leading to the vast majority of England's religious houses being closed down. By the end of his life, Henry was totally blind, totally deaf, and totally incapacitated by gout. His final wife, Catherine Parr, nursed him through his last illness and outlived him, marrying his former advisor, Thomas Seymour. Mary, his daughter with Catherine of Aragon, became Queen Mary I, but died without producing any children, and Elizabeth, his daughter with him, went on to become the famed and hugely successful Queen Elizabeth I. Edward VI, Henry's son with Jane Seymour, became king at the age of 9, but died at 15, likely of tuberculosis. Of Henry's 6 children, only Elizabeth and Edward survived to adulthood. So why exactly was Henry VIII such a feared man? Well, firstly, he was undeniably brutal. He had 6 of his wives imprisoned in the Tower of London, with 2 of them losing their heads. He famously executed 2 of his closest advisors, Thomas Cromwell and Thomas More, and is believed to have been responsible for the deaths of around 300 people through his court of Star Chamber. During his reign, England became increasingly violent, and the streets of London were filled with cut-price prostitutes and commoners who had fled the countryside to escape the brutality of the nobility. Henry himself was incredibly imposing, and while he enjoyed jousting and other sports in his youth, he took great pleasure in hunting, often shooting 200 deer a day. But it wasn't just his violence that made Henry such a feared man. It was also his sheer determination to get his own way. As we've already mentioned, he was prepared to break with the Catholic Church in order to divorce Catherine of Aragon and marry Anne Boleyn, something that no English monarch had ever done before. And he similarly defied the Pope by refusing to accept the annulment of his first marriage, despite it being declared invalid by the Vatican. This defiant attitude also extended to his wars with France and Scotland, where he achieved little military success but spent huge amounts of money. Indeed, his determination to achieve his goals often got him into trouble, as when he launched the abortive 1539 campaign to suppress a rebellion in northern England because he did unbelieve reports that it had been put down. One of the reasons Henry was able to pursue such aggressive policies both at home and abroad was that he surrounded himself with sycophants and yes-men who would stand up to him. He was notoriously bad-tempered and prone to violent mood swings, which meant that anyone who disagreed with him risked incurring his wrath. This wasn't helped by his tendency to overindulge, regularly eating and drinking to excess and enjoying smoking weed in a long pipe, even when he had trusted advisors around him, such as the statesman Thomas Wallop. He was capable of turning on them in an instant. While Wolsey managed to avoid execution, he fell from grace after failing to secure Henry's desired annulment from Catherine of Aragon and died, believing himself to be the most miserable man alive. Another reason Henry was able to behave so badly was that he enjoyed a degree of popularity with the people of England, especially in his early years. Many ordinary people saw him as a champion of the poor, a man of the people who would fight for them against the old order of things. This was partly thanks to his image as a brilliant athlete and warrior, which was cultivated by his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and the propaganda machine of the Tudor dynasty. Unfortunately, however, this image didn't match reality, and Henry's military record was far from impressive. Despite being bested by his son-in-law, the future Scottish King James V, in a friendly jousting match in 1536, Henry's boasts of prowess in battle were undermined by his failure to conquer France and defeat the Scots. There are various reasons for Henry's appeal to the masses, including his physicality and charisma, but one of the most important was that he was marketed as a new kind of monarch, a modern prince who would shake up the old system and usher in a new era of prosperity and peace for England. Instead, he proved to be an autocratic and brutal ruler who surrounded himself with sycophants, neglected his duties, and threw the country into religious turmoil. Despite this, he remained popular for most of his reign, even after his health deteriorated, and he became increasingly senile. This was largely because he kept control of the narrative through propaganda and controlled much of the media, such as through the printing press, which he used to disseminate his views and those of his regime. It was only after his death that the full extent of his disastrous policies and terrible character became clear, and his successors had to work hard to undo the damage he had done. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other content, where we bring you new videos every week on a range of historical topics. Why not subscribe to be the first to hear about them? Or if you want to support us and get exclusive content, become a patron. See you next time.